Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you are. Really glad to have you with us today on a Q&A all about live online learning. Really looking forward to spending the next half an hour with you. My name is Jo. A lot of you know me already. My company, Lightbulb Moment, what we focus on is webinars and virtual classrooms. But less about me. I do want to introduce you very briefly to Mike. Mike, why do we have the same last name and what are you doing today?
For my sins, I am Joe's brother and we both run Lightbulb Moment, and I'm the producer here today, so feel free to drop me a message in the chat window and I'll be there to try and answer it.
Thank you very much, Mike. Now, what I've done is I've turned my webcam off, and I suggest the rest of us do the same. It will just keep the bandwidth really clear, and hopefully we'll make sure that everybody can hear us properly and have a good experience. So thank you very much for that, Mike. Now, we do have some tools we're using today, a really quick run through. Make sure you've clicked to open your participant panel. You can use the hands up. You can answer questions with the tick and cross. And we're not going to be unmuting you guys today, but we do have the chat window. So make sure you've clicked chat, you've got that open, and make sure you set it to everyone so then everybody can see your questions, but also everybody can see you contributing to the answers as well. So that's what I wanted to focus on, and we need to go and have a look at our questions. Now, the questions I said that I would start with first of all are the ones that were on our community page. So let me just jump over to our free community. Mike will put the link in chat for you. You can have a look at what's there. And I said any of the questions that were here we would focus on first of all. So let's go to this one from Betty. She says, I have a client who would like to convert a one-day face-to-face training course into a one-day virtual classroom. Is that a good idea? So in the chat, guys, you need to let us know, is that a good idea to move from a one-day face-to-face into a one-day virtual classroom? I think for me, probably it's a no. Yeah, David, I agree with you. I'd start there and go, okay, what are we thinking might be better instead? And Penny's used that WebEx, I think so. That's a good idea. Annabelle said maybe break it down into parts. Good idea. Martin says it depends what it's about. Absolutely. And Cara says the same. There are many factors. So I think you've all got absolutely the right idea. The point is, let's split it up. Margaret says, I would have thought shorter sessions would be better. Generally, I agree with you. I would say probably 90-minute sessions. Yeah, David is saying 60 to 90 minutes, maybe a couple of hours. You could do and maybe split that over 2 mornings or something like that. Martin say maybe 3 hours, maybe 3 one-hour sessions. That could be interesting. And also Rachel saying no, it's too long. Break it down into parts and also combine other learning materials in a blended fashion. Love that, Rachel. Thank you very much. I agree with most of you, but here's the but. We're in strange times. With this whole coronavirus issue, a lot of things are having to be done really rapidly. So there actually might be some reasons where the one-day face-to-face actually needs to be a one-day virtual classroom. It could be that you've got that time scheduled, it's been a hell on to be able to get everyone together. That's the day it has to happen. If that's the case, it is about, as you say, chunking it up, breaking it up, making sure there are lots of breaks in there, and also making sure that the activities are there. So generally, I'm with you all, no, put it into a blend, break it up into what makes sense. So Betty, I know you couldn't make it live, but really hope that that has helped you out there. Cara in chat says, I feel like in higher education, we've seen panic-gogy. Instead of pedagogy, it's panic-gogy, instead of focusing on good design and learning principles. Green tick if you've seen the same thing, like Cara saying, it's probably not just higher education. I imagine it's a lot of corporate organisations as well. So green tick if you've seen the same as Cara. Yeah, there's quite a few of these green ticks coming through. It's a real challenge because you're right, we're panicking. Suddenly we've got to get things online. So that's absolutely fine at the moment, but at some point we need to settle down and look back at redesigning again. Rachel says, if you have a break in a webinar, use a timer on the screen to help people come back. Love that idea, Rachel. You could do that as PowerPoint or a video, or you could have a webcam with a clock, something like that. Loads of ideas. Thank you, Betty. We've also got a question from Jackie. Now, Jackie, you're here. Just say hi in the chat for us. You've asked this question here, where you're saying you've only just started researching the possibility of whether you can deliver live online. And we love these questions, Jackie. There are no questions that are too basic. Yes, there are lots of different platforms and applications and tools, and you're finding it a minefield to work out which one does what. Okay, so what platform should we be looking at first of all? That seems to be the kind of the first key question. So hi, Jackie, thank you very much. What Mike is going to do is share a link to a podcast we've got about choosing platforms. Everybody here in the chat, what's your favourite platform to use? Not necessarily the one you've got at work or you are using, but what's your favourite virtual classroom platform to use? Cara makes a great point, the one that works, absolutely. So what's your favourite one to use? There's going to be a lot of Zoom fans, and we're using Zoom today. Martin loves platform 9 3/4. Good Harry Potter fan there, thank you. Penny says Zoom, but only just started using it. The advantage of Zoom is you can get an account really quickly. It's £11.99 a month or similar in your area, and it's really easy to start using. So Mike has shared the link there to, oh, that's the one with Mike Taylor. We've also got the other one that you and I did, Mike, a little bit later on. Cara likes WebEx. WebEx Training Centre is really good. That's great if you're in a corporate environment. If you're an individual, it's a little bit harder to get that license. And what else have we got? Rachel says Adobe Connect for virtual classrooms and Zoom for more conversational style informal events. Really like that distinction, Rachel. I really love Adobe Connect because it's got lots of funky things that you can do. So that's a really good point. David says the problem with Zoom is that many organizations don't allow it to be used. That's a problem with any of these systems, which is why it's important to know with your attendees, with your likely people who are coming onto your sessions, what type of industries are they in. If they're in banking, for instance, or whatever it might be, something really secure, then you need to make sure you've got something that people can access via a browser, like Zoom, like Adobe Connect. You might need to consider, are you working in a team? So Mike and I, he's my producer today, he is my producer on all of my sessions. We find it easier to work in Adobe Connect. It doesn't mean other things can't do it. Rolf says, what's the funky stuff that Adobe Connect can do? Adobe Connect can have more control for the presenter or for the host. And also it's got something called the presenter only area, like a backstage where you can get things ready. I like that you can upload your slides and create different slide decks rather than sharing like I am right now. Also, what I like about it is that you've got private chat, you've got different layouts, so you can have multiple chats on the screen, you can have multiple polls and chats on the screen. You can also, with the breakout rooms, set them up ahead of time, and they're much more functional than any other breakout room I've ever used. David asks if Adobe Connect is more expensive. I think it is a tad, certainly a little bit more than Zoom, but it does depend on the number of users you have on your license. I've just renewed my license. It's a 100-person license. It's technically a webinar license, but it's got all the same functionality, and that's £1,200, including the UK value-added tax for the year. So it's not that expensive. You can get a 50-person license and a 25-person license. Mark, if you go onto zoom.us, they've got really clear pricing. For one license, it's £11.99 British pounds a month. Okay, so hopefully we've answered that question for you, Jackie, to a degree, and if you've got more questions off of that, obviously you can go and ask them again in the in the community. You also say in here, what tips do you have for translating course content that would normally be covered by a group activity and exercise? So let's turn to that just very briefly then. What tips have you all got that we can share in the chat window for translating course content? So what you normally do face-to-face, you now have to deliver it virtually. How do you go about converting that? So go and have a think about that. And what are your tips on this? So go and share your tips on this. So Jackie, thank you so much for your questions. Hopefully we'll set you in the right direction. So what are your tips? Mark has said about Google Translate for other languages. That's great, Mark. We're talking more about converting activities, but you make a great point if you're using other languages as well. So thank you for that. So what tips have we got? Lynn says polls and chats. Yes, ask lots of chat questions. Use the polling features because they're really good for getting whole group responses, seeing where your group's at. Normally we'd look around a room and see nods or frowns. Maybe a poll can help you with that if you write your questions well. Cara says triage content for what can be delivered via video versus online instruction versus asynchronously. Absolutely great, Cara, and you know so much about this. What can you record as a video and send out? What can you put in whatever you've got available to you online or send out ahead of time? And what actually is best to be having as a discussion? Lynn said a case study with questions. Great idea to do that. And that translates really well into live online as well, because people can read that ahead of time and you can use the functionality, whiteboards, polling, breakout rooms to go and discuss that. Thank you, Lynn. Daniel says, I try to do something every few minutes. Ask, then tell. So it's not endless information, and I storyboard beforehand. Daniel, I love it. And every few minutes is perfect. If we're doing this, if we're new to this, what we have to think about is every few minutes we might not do something in our face-to-face classroom like ask a question. We might, and that's great. But what we are always doing is monitoring that visual feedback, that physical body language. That's the bit we don't have live online. So what we need to consider is how can we build out that interactivity every few minutes, just like Daniel's saying. Thank you, Daniel. David says, I like polls, but it seems a bit clunky and doesn't always seem to work or be seen by participants. David, that depends a little bit on your software. WebEx Training Center, for instance, completely agree with you. I find the polls really clunky. Adobe Connect, I find they're really smooth because you've got the funky layouts and you can set them up ahead of time. And in Zoom, they work really well, but all of our systems at the moment are on high alert. They're all being really, really used. So we do have to give the systems a bit of leeway, you're right. Charlotte, hi Charlotte, says raise hands. Great for saying who's had this experience. And then if you're running a virtual classroom, maybe it's unmute and let's have a discussion. Margaret says, don't necessarily try to convert. Go back to what I want them to know or understand or do and create a virtual way of doing that. Oh, Margaret, virtual high five for you. It can be about redesigning it from the bottom up. I like that. Send out the pre-work, Margaret says. Clarify, it will be discussed in the session. Great. Rachel says, be creative in thinking about the kinds of activities you can use. If people move in the room, can they move on the screen? I do line up in workshops and line ups using arrows on the screen. Really great example there, Rachel. Thank you. David says breakout rooms are very good for up to 3 persons. So the breakout rooms function live online just the same as they would do face-to-face. You can go in and out of the rooms and see and hear what people are doing, and they can have those discussions. They can work on activities, they can use flip charts, they can bring that back to that main area for a plenary debrief afterwards. Really great stuff. So we're coming to the end of this part of the discussion. So let us know your questions in chat. So what questions do you have? Let us know in chat. Mike will keep an eye on it so I don't miss any. Rachel adds, you can still do things like paired discussions through the chat area by getting people to chat in pairs through the chat box. Brilliant idea, Rachel, because that private chat option, if you have it, means that somebody like Rachel and Lynn could be having a private chat to each other. It's exactly the same as a paired discussion. It just goes very quiet for 3 or 4 minutes, which is no bad thing. And then you come back together and do your discussion. Love it, Rachel. Good example. Mark says at JBL Credit, we find overall that our productivity has declined moving our sessions online. Really interesting, Mark. And Mike's asking, what key indicators do you have of the problem? So tell us a bit more, Mark, so we can try and unpick that and help you out. Mark says, it's the body language you mentioned. The training requires more refresher sessions. So Mark, what it seems like to me is you're saying you deliver your training online and then people aren't quite doing whatever it is they need to do, then you have to deliver a refresher to remind them about something. So Mark, is that kind of the thing that you're thinking about? Let us know in chat or a green tick, and we can try and help Mark out and start thinking about this. Yes, okay, Mark. So I think what you need to look at there, Mark, is how are you getting people involved in that live session in the first place? Because one of the things with the interactivity and the importance of that is through that you should start having an awareness of, Bob's not quite getting it, or Alice is doing absolutely stunning, she's going to be great. But if you haven't designed and delivered those activities within that session, you're not going to get a gist of that. So keep chatting in there, we'll come back to that. Mike, what other questions do we have that I need to answer?
Cara has asked an interesting one about private chat messages in Zoom. Can you get a full transcript of the recording? So have you heard of anything about that, Joe?
So Cara, that's a good question. Generally speaking, you can't see private chat in virtual classroom or webinar sessions, generally speaking. What Zoom can do, you'd have to go and Google this, I read it the other day, is what Zoom can do is give you a transcript of stuff that has come through to the presenters only. So not all private chat. So if Cara and Daniel are private chatting to each other, that doesn't get recorded. But if Cara sends a private chat to the presenters, there is an option for that to be recorded, I think. So you'd have to go and Google that and find out more detail. What you can also do is you can save chat. So as an attendee, if it's switched on, you're allowed to. You can set in Zoom that your chat be saved automatically, or a facilitator can do that. And that's actually quite important in Zoom, because Zoom as a video doesn't actually record the chat window, whereas WebEx or Adobe Connect do, as an example. So good question there. What's next, Mike?
That is Mike typing in the chat window and not paying any attention to what you're doing. So I'm going to pass back to you, Joe.
Okay, thank you very much. At least he's honest. At least he's honest. Okay, I think there is a question, something up here. Oh yes, Rolf said, Connect, so Adobe Connect versus WebEx. I have a client who's WebEx only. I always say, Rolf, that the best platform is the one that you have. So if they've got WebEx, you use WebEx. It's there, people are using it, it's it's installed and everything already. With WebEx, be careful. There's WebEx meetings, WebEx events, and WebEx training, and they all are subtly different. So you do need to know which one you're using. WebEx meeting, for instance, doesn't have things like the green tick and the red X that we've got today. It doesn't have breakouts. If we're looking at Connect versus WebEx Training Center, there's a lot that's similar. There's a lot that they both do really well, but also what we have to take into account, I think, Adobe are doing really good investment in updating Connect. I haven't seen that with WebEx. But if your client's got WebEx, design for that and go for it. Lynn says, I don't think you can cover as much content well in an hour webinar as an hour face-to-face. So Lynn, I think you've got a good point. The delivery methodologies are different. So to tell us a little bit more, Lynn, in chat about why you think that so that we can unpack it. And Rachel says, is it about covering content or effective learning? And that's really interesting, Rachel. Whether it's face-to-face or online, I often find less is more in my experience. And I think that's a really good point, is it's how you're delivering, it's what you're delivering and what you want people to do afterwards. So Lynn, tell us a little bit more in chat about what you think about that, and we can come back to it and see if we can unpack that a little bit more. Now, I think there was another question in here. Jackie said, any obvious pitfalls to avoid as a novice? Really great question, Jackie. So everybody in the chat window, what's maybe your top one tip for Jackie on an obvious pitfall to avoid? If you could share one thing for Jackie and everybody else who's here or watching the recording, what would it be? If there was just one tip, what would it be? I think for my point, Jackie, it would be learn your technology, whether it's Zoom or Adobe Connect or Skype or Teams or anything. The more time you can spend learning how it works to get comfortable with delivering in it, and also just knowing actually, how am I going to, can I do private chat? Is there a polling feature? How does it work? What type of questions can you ask? If you can get that bit, that's probably the biggest hurdle you'll get over. So it's learning your platform. But what tips do we have from everybody else? Let me have a look. Martin says, make sure you set up early to make sure it's working. Yes, Martin, we've definitely learned that the hard way, haven't we? Thank you. Cara says, talk with inflection and enthusiasm, but also slow enough for folks to follow. Thank you, Cara. And you know what? With all that's going on, the biggest piece of feedback I've had from Michael recently is breathe and slow down. Just keep going 10 to the dozen trying to help everyone. David said, practice with friends first. Great top tip there. Thank you. Daniel says, one tip, practice ahead and pretend they are there to be comfortable. And that's why the interaction is so important, because then I know you're there and paying attention. Thank you, Daniel. Len says, be careful that you've turned off the sound on any additional audio, such as your phone, or if you've dialed in another device or connected to Zoom in another. Yes, that's really important. Rachel says, don't make the session too complicated. Don't include all the tools in one go. Ease yourself and your participants in. That's a really great tip there as well. And that's exactly what I did all those years ago as well. And Mark saying, always practice beforehand with friends. Okay, brilliant tips there, everybody. Thank you. Let's go back to this point about content. Daniel said earlier in the chat, I don't try not to include content. This should be pre or post learning. I use the session to explore the topic. So a lot of people call that the flipped classroom. It's that idea of then using the time you're together really effectively. Thank you, Daniel. Lynn said, absolutely, with regards to the learning and that point about what we deliver. Thank you for the green tick, Daniel. A response to Mark, I think, saying about training requirement refresher sessions. I think we should aim to cover less new stuff in a session. So your comments all making sense now, Lynn. Thank you very much. So cover less material in your live online sessions. So saying something similar to Rachel, use that time to get hands-on, to discuss and to find out what people's queries are. So Mark, hopefully that will help you and give you a little something to think about. And of course, just go and share in our community if you've got specific questions, because there's people there to help you and to answer you as well. And last top tip from David, make sure young children are fully occupied doing something else. Really like that, thank you. So what other questions do we have? I make it that we've got about kind of 5-ish minutes left of the session. I want to make sure we've answered enough of your questions and helped you out. And if you need to go, obviously go. That's absolutely fine. Jackie says, thanks everyone for the tips. So Jackie, hopefully we've given you a whole load of stuff there to at least get started and going on that. So if you have more questions, by all means, please do share them. But also, it's probably a really good idea to have some reflection as well. We'll come to reflection in a moment. Daniel says, what tools outside of the webinar do you use? I use Padlet and Slido. Really good question, Daniel. There's loads of them, and I'm sure you can all share more of them than I can. There's Mentimeter, there's Lino.it, which is really good for like post-it notes. There's Kahoot as well. So everybody, please do go and share kind of your examples in there as well. I don't tend to use them that much. I try and use everything that's inside the virtual classroom because anything that I do with those, I find I can do inside a virtual classroom, and I'm happy with that. But there's loads of stuff out there that you should definitely go and explore. Lynn says, any good suggestions on session design from a content perspective? Oh, good question, Lynn. Mike, we've got a couple of design podcasts that we can share for Lynn. Also, I'm just trying to think, on our website, on our blog site, I'm pretty certain I've got a kind of new to design blog. So I will see if I can go and find that for you as well. And I'd love to know a little bit more about the session design and your kind of thoughts about kind of what you're struggling with. I'd start with, what is it that you need from a performance outcome? That's always a great place to start. Also, I've got for you to have a look at, this is a diagram that we've got in a link that I'm sharing, which is a session structure. It's really basic. It's got largely very similar to what you might do face-to-face. But it's got a few things in there like helping you to remember to teach the tools, ask questions to get people involved, get people on audio early on in order to make sure that they answer questions later on. So those couple of blogs might just get you started. Mike's sharing those podcasts for you about design. And again, just go and ask on the community. We'd love to help you out and answer some questions for you. I think it's about time that we asked you for what you've picked up today. So in the chat window, please, what's your light bulb moment? What's been useful for you? What's been insightful? What's been funny or annoying? This is the first one of these that we've done. We're thinking about making them regular at the moment. So we'd love to know, what have you got out of it? And we might think about doing this again. So what's been your light bulb moment from today? Phenomenally useful, says Mark. Thank you. Kate says all the different platforms discussed. Thank you, Kate. Hopefully giving you a few hints to look at. Margaret says keeping it simple rather than getting too clever too quick. Margaret, I've done that far too many times. Definitely keep it simple. Well done. Ralph says, how can we keep the chat window contents? I will be saving it off, Ralph, and I'll be posting it with the recording on the community. Martin says, really great idea, Joe. Thanks. My pleasure, Martin. I think we'll be running some more of these. Daniel says, it's given me confidence and some new tools. Awesome. Jane says, never heard of digital body language. Need to investigate. Yeah, we've got a few blogs on that one for you. Martin says, LBM or light bulb moment. Oh, right, yeah, light bulb moment. So we say LBM is light bulb moment. I wasn't sure you were, Martin. The light bulb moment was confirmation that our move to Zoom is the right one. Absolutely it is, Martin. Penny says, nice to know there's lots of other newbies too. I'm not alone. You definitely aren't, Penny. That's what our community's there for. Annabelle says, thank you, Joe. It's been great to see how you present too. My absolute pleasure. And this isn't even something designed and planned. It's just kind of really off the cuff having a chat. But thank you, Annabelle. David said, spending time taking Q&A during delivery rather than new material delivery is interesting. Yes, David, definitely go and have a think about that and report back to us and let us know how you do. Jackie says, I've still got lots of homework to do. Yes, Jackie, but we're here to support you. Lynn says, jogging my thinking on content design from all the comments and tips. Absolutely our pleasure, Lynn. And how can I see the blog hyperlinks in the chat? So the hyperlinks, they should just be showing up in chat as blue links to click on, Lynn. Mark says, ergonomic management keyboard. Yeah, definitely need a good keyboard. And Rachel said, really nice to see Zoom used with slides, a Q&A session. Always good to see different formats. Our pleasure, Rachel. And Jackie says, very generous of everyone sharing their knowledge. They are a lovely bunch. Thank you, Joe. It's been good to see a live session in action. Absolutely my pleasure, Jackie. And Catherine says, thank you. Lots to think about. That's what we're here for. Mark says, thank you for the session. Our pleasure. And Lynn says, I'd like to save the hyperlinks. I see. We'll save the chat off, Lynn, and that will then be on our website. And probably easiest to do is just click on them. They'll load in your browser. And then you just come back to Zoom and you can do that for all of them. And as Lynn says, you can save the text as well from the chat. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for your time today. We wanted just a quick half an hour to give you all some stuff to think about. I think we're probably going to do this again. Give us a green tick if you're thinking, yes, definitely should do this half an hour again. Thank you for all your kind comments there. And, let us know if you've got any challenges, any problems. You can go and ask on that community. We've got all sorts of blogs and podcasts, as you saw in the chat. Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. And please, 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 do stay safe. So on behalf of Michael and myself at Lightbulb Moment, thank you very much indeed and goodbye.